Okay, round two. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, S-H-O-W, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
Greetings, America. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. Glad to have you with me this fine day. I hope it's kind of warm. You know, whenever it's super hot outside, I'm like, I'm ready for the cold weather. And now the cold weather's here. Like, well, time for it to warm up again. It's been 3 days of cold. Time for a little warm. Just, you can't win. I gotta, it's cold. My wonderful child brought me coffee, and at least I can warm up with coffee, but the office is so cold it may cool down the coffee more than the coffee warms me up. We'll see. Speaking, I got to tell you guys, I've got, there's a company in Georgia. I do an advertisement with Georgia Spa Company. I got a hot tub from them, and everybody tells me, oh, in the wintertime, it's going to be so great when it's cold out. You sit in the hot tub. Well, last night was the coldest as y'all. It was so cold. When I went outside last night, it had rained the day before, and the top of that cover of the hot tub was ice. It was already frozen. That's how cold it was when I went outside last night to sit in the hot tub. And it was fantastic. The water was hot. It was fantastic. But I didn't want to get out of it because it was so cold. And I'm like, okay, all right, Erickson, you can get out. You can get out, Erickson. All right, 3, 2, well, maybe I'll stay a little while. And I had it in my head last night was Tuesday. I didn't even watch the football game last night. I could have watched the football game. I was like, it's Tuesday night. There's no football on. I got to find something else to watch. And I found a great show to watch. And then today, everybody was talking about the football game last night. And I was like, there's no Tuesday night football. It's like, you idiot. It was Monday night last night. Tonight's Tuesday. I don't know. It's been a week already, and we're only a few days in. But I did get out of the hot tub, and I discovered that if you get out and you move fast, you're still hot enough from the hot tub that you can put the cover on and get back inside. Just saying. Now, I got to talk about something that I don't want to talk. I want to talk about it, but I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to ruffle feathers on this one. I ruffle enough feathers. I try to minimize the feathers that I ruffle, but I think I got to ruffle some feathers here. Nick Fuentes, the white nationalist, racist, he's an awful human being. He has some video podcasting he does. He calls it the America First movement. He's kind of taken what Trump did and turned it into some white nationalist thing and says that all non-Christians will be executed when we take power. They need to be given the death penalty. They must be absolutely annihilated when we take power. The dude doesn't know Jesus. He's a white nationalist. He's an anti-Semite. He's a racist. And yet people in the Republican Party continue to give him access. People in the Republican Party continue to treat this kid and his acolytes seriously. Now, I want to jump from that to an unrelated story, but there's a tie here. And you need to be patient with me while I talk about this. And this is from the Daily Beast, and I realize the Daily Beast hates my guts and yours, doesn't like conservatives. But this is a notable story. Hannah Giles was picked. She's a fantastic conservative activist. And she was picked to take over Project Veritas after James O'Keefe was booted. This is how the Daily Beast writes. Hannah Giles, the CEO of conservative nonprofit Project Veritas, announced her resignation effective immediately on Monday. saying she'd unwittingly stepped into an unsalvageable mess upon taking the job. She was named the group's chief executive 4 months after its messy breakup with founder James O'Keefe in February. In a statement posted to Twitter, she claimed she'd taken over an organization wrought with strong evidence of past illegality and past financial improprieties, suggesting she'd had no prior knowledge of the infamously embattled nonprofit's alleged improprieties. Giles continued on to say that once she discovered the evidence, I brought the information to the appropriate law enforcement authorities. O'Keefe and Giles, of course, had teamed up in 2009 to take on Acorn, and when he was out, they put her in. This is her actual statement from Twitter. I refuse to call it X, by the way. Refuse, it is Twitter. I'm stepping down from all roles with Project Veritas and Project Veritas Action effective immediately. Though I had high hopes when I joined the organizations, I stepped into an unsalvageable mess, one wrought with strong evidence of past illegality and past financial improprieties. Once such evidence was discovered, I brought the information to the appropriate law enforcement authorities. Thank you. Or law enforcement agencies. Thank you. That's it. I don't want to be seen as tying Hannah Giles to the Nick Fuentes story in any way, shape, or form. But there's a larger context that relates to both of these stories. And that is that at some point within the conservative movement, the principles of the movement gave way to greed, graft, corruption. And an organization like Project Veritas, a brilliant activist like Hannah Giles, has to step away from it, discovering that all was not what it seemed and there was possible illegality. Meanwhile, you have conservatives who continue to platform a white nationalist like Nick Fuentes and give him credibility. You've got TPUSA, Turning Point USA, wanting to spend over $100 million on ballot harvesting projects in, I think, only 3 or 4 states. That's absurd. You should be able to run an entire nation with that budget for ballot harvesting, not just 3 states. You find out how the people who are in charge are living these lavish lifestyles, buying expensive houses in expensive neighborhoods on expensive golf courses with expensive boats. For all of the faults of the original conservative movement, and there were some, this younger generation of people who've come into the conservative movement seem to just want to get rich quick. And they are principleless in many cases. Or you have people like Hannah Giles, who is very principled and takes over an organization, and turns out it was part of the problem. The conservative movement has got to clean itself up. No one else is going to clean up the conservative movement. And here's the problem. As partisans have begun to use lawfare against each other, you're going to have progressive district attorneys and prosecutors come after the conservative movement. We're seeing this in Washington, D.C. with what's happened with Leonard Leo and the Federalist Society and his various other organizations. The progressives are using the political appointed district attorney, or really U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia, to prosecute Leonard Leo and his organization because they're too damn effective. They are so effective, they are so good, that they're coming after Leonard Leo to try to take him out through lawfare. And Leonard Leo is an upstanding, fantastic human being. And they're going to have to really dig hard to try to find an undotted I or an uncrossed T and try to impute it to Leonard Leo to come after him. But so many of these organizations on the right are making it so easy. Through waste and fraud, through corruption, through graft, through greed, there's a grift that has taken over so much of the conservative movement, and so many of it is these younger white dudes who came out of nowhere, no one ever heard of, and they're on social media, and they're detracting from good organizations. I see it happening all the time now, and these guys, they don't actually want to win. Because if they win, then suddenly they can't claim that an election was stolen and have you write them a check. If they win, they suddenly have to take leadership responsibility. They don't want to do that. They want to complain. They want to bellyache. They want to tell you the world is unfair, and that's why we keep losing. It's not that they're incompetent. It's not that they're just there to live a lavish lifestyle. We have let the conservative movement become corrupt, and too many, this is part of my problem here, too many of the older generation of conservative leaders in the country are so enthusiastic about bringing in the young leaders of the conservative movement, they're allowing the corrupt grifters of the conservative movement to take over because they want to be the cool old granddad of the conservative movement as opposed to saying, kids, you're unethical. And how much money from how many donors are going to these sorts of things? Project Veritas put some great points on the board, but it also appears that there were internal problems at that organization where not everything was on the up and up. TPUSA does not seem to have really led a lot of college conservatives to expand conservatism around the country. It has not been as effective as its marketing campaign would have you believe. And now it wants $100 million. I guarantee you what's probably going to happen is that the outside consultants who get the money will have ties to the in-the-house operators who get cuts and commissions. And a lot of people are going to get wealthy, but the ballot access harvesting game probably isn't going to be that good. That's my suspicion. Y'all, if you are an older member of the conservative movement, an older middle-class person who writes checks to conservative causes, I'm afraid some of you are just getting played. If you are writing checks to a 20 or a young 30-something who runs a conservative group, that's probably your big red flag right there. And I don't mean to disparage the 20 and 30-somethings. I've been one. But I don't see these groups putting a lot of points on the board. I see them just putting a lot of money in bank accounts. And what happens with a lot of groups is they take money and then they use a mail vendor or they use a videographer or they use a fundraising shop, and then they have an interest in the fundraising shop or the mail vendor or the advertiser. And so they're taking commissions there, and so they steer their money from one group into another group that they also have a controlling interest in, and so they're cashing in multiple times along the way, getting very wealthy. And they're not putting points on the board for the conservative movement. I'm deeply alarmed at this. I saw the Hannah Giles story, and I had high hopes for her rehabilitating Project Veritas. And yet she's had to leave because she says the more she dug in, the more she found things that weren't proper and possibly illegal things. And she had to alert law enforcement agencies that stuff wasn't on the up and up. And I think there's a bigger issue here. And the bigger issue is this. There are people within the conservative movement, broadly speaking, who have arranged their interests so that they profit through loss. You don't have to win. You don't have to put points on the board. You don't have to advance the conservative cause, because if you lose, you can claim you're a victim. Don't think this is just something that happens on the left. Don't think that it's just the left, the victimology of the left. The left has elevated victims, victimization, and if you're a victim, you've been shamed in some way, you're the hero of the left, you have a voice of moral clarity. It's happening on the right as well. The groups that claim the election was stolen and they're going to prove it, they get tons of money from donors. They haven't proven the election was stolen. If anything, some of them have been subpoenaed and gotten in legal hot water because of the claims they've made and the stuff they've done. There's been no smoking gun. In fact, the smoking guns people thought they had turned out not to be guns at all, but something else, smoking, steaming divots of something. But they play to your emotions and they play to your idea that you too are a victim and they fundraise off of you. There is something profoundly corrupt a cancer within the conservative movement right now that those who have been long members of the conservative movement, you got to start cleaning this stuff up. Our donors are being played. Our conservative, elderly, middle-class donors are being taken advantage of. And the young people who claim to be starting these great groups, they're not putting points on the board. They're wasting people's money. They themselves are living lavish lifestyles, and they continue to perpetuate a cycle of losing and victimization. At some point, we've got to decide we want to win. We got to decide we want to win. And right now, there's too much money to be made in losing for the conservative movement, it seems, to change its ways.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number 877-973-7425 if you want to be on the show. I don't recommend TV shows lightly, in large part because just I'm learning with different levels of tolerance for profanity and other things on TV shows. Some people get offended and say, you talk about God on the radio. How can you watch this television show? The language. I understand. A lot of people who don't want to extend each other grace in movie and TV show preferences but I'm going to recommend one to you, and I need you to know it's British, which means the language. My goodness. You got to have a high tolerance, although the third season doesn't have as much. But British shows tend to have more bad language. It is part of British culture. I mean, it really is. We live in a fallen world, and they are a real post-Christian society. But nonetheless, Gary Oldman is my favorite actor. He was in Immortal Beloved. He was James Gordon in the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight series. Winston Churchill in The Darkest Hour. He is fantastic in everything he's in, and he is the lead actor on a show on Apple TV Plus called Slow Horses. It's based on a series of books. The third season has just come out, and it is, I thought the first season was great. The second season was good, not as great as the first season. The third season, I'm 3 episodes in, and I'm dying to binge watch it, and Apple only trickles them out once a week. But if you've got Apple TV Plus, if you can get access to Apple TV Plus, Slow Horses is the best show you're not watching. I'm telling you. The third season so far, 3 episodes in, is incredible. It's called Slow Horses. It is available through Apple TV. It stars Gary Oldman, among others. It is a remarkable television show you should be watching. Language warning in the program, but it's a wonderful, wonderful TV show. This third season is fantastic so far. Now, speaking of fantastic, Vision Computers is fantastic. They are. We have a computer from Vision Computers in our house. It's the gaming PC. My son wanted one. That's all he wanted. For 2 Christmases, we put him off, and finally we thought he was old enough to have one. And I called Vision Computers, and they built it. They service it. I never have to be IT in my house. He just calls a number. If he just doesn't know how to do something, he calls them, and Vision can fix it. Vision's so good at it. He accidentally loosened a cable on his monitor once, and they could figure out, based on what he was describing, loose cable. Told him how to fix it. I never had to intervene. They can do this for you. They can do this for your office. If you've got multiple computers you keep up in your office, Vision can build you computers, laptops, or PCs, and then they can service them. And so your employees can call Vision and get an answer. How do I do X, Y, or Z? You don't have to do it. If you got something wrong, they can remote in and fix it, help you with printer support, email support, you name it. Call them at 404-COMPUTE. Any of you nationwide, from Grand Forks, North Dakota, all the way down to Miami. 404-COMPUTE. That's their phone number. Call Vision Computers. Tell them I sent you. They'll give you a great deal.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hello, welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across America. The phone number 877-973-7425. If you want to be on the program, inflation. We must talk about inflation. It's still above the Fed level inflation is of 2%. And as we dig into it, there's a problem. When you take out oil and gas, when you take out energy, the inflation is above 3%. Now, keep in mind that there will be some news outlets that claim that inflation is going down. It's not really declining so much as the rate of inflation is slowing, and that means that there's been no dip in prices. There's still a problem. This is from Axios. The consumer price index rose a moderate 0.1% in November as falling gas prices helped drag the overall index down. Though some underlying price pressures appear to be sticky, the rapid price gains that define recent years look to be in the past. But the consumer price index rose 3.1% for the 12 months ending in November, down from 3.2% in October. Gas prices fell 6% alone last month. Yes, but the index that excludes food and energy prices, closely watched by the Federal Reserve, picked up pace. It rose 0.3% in November, slightly faster than 0.2% in October, a sign that underlying price pressures are sticky. Quicker price increases for shelter, medical care, and auto insurance put upward pressure on the index. Over the last 12 months, the so-called core CPI increased 4% in November, the same as the prior month. That suggests that the Fed will not be cutting interest rates anytime soon. When I do a monologue, we pick one every day and we send it out to subscribers, the video and a write-up of it. And I told Philip to send one out today on what I said about the Biden White House. It just keeps failing at the basics. I've got a book coming out in January, and it's a book on how secularism has become a religion. And every time I write a book, I say I'll never do another one. And I'm already thinking, I know the next book I want to write. I want to write a book about remembering what works. Because there are strains of the new right. And a lot of people use right and conservative interchangeably, and that's not really the case. There are strains of the new right convinced, just like strains of much of the left, that we should do new things, that the old things, they're passé, they don't necessarily work. And yet we need to get back to the basics, and we need to remember the basics, and we need to remember the old lessons, like, for example, the broken window theory of crime. Progressives worked very hard to discredit it, but it works. It's what Rudy Giuliani used to clean up New York. I was thinking about this on Friday. I don't know if anybody in the mayor's office in Atlanta is listening, but I took my son on Friday to see Nate Bargatze, the comedian, in Atlanta. We stayed in Buckhead in a nice hotel. We took MARTA, the subway system in Atlanta. MARTA is not, for those of you not from the metro Atlanta area, MARTA is basically 4 trains. They go north-south and they go east-west. It's not a very exciting subway system. And MARTA goes precisely exactly where you don't want to go. Rarely does it go where you want to go. This weekend was one of those rare times that there were trains that kind of went where we wanted to go, to State Farm Arena. Nate Bargatze sold it out. The number of people openly smoking marijuana on the trains, I've heard about it, but I hardly ever. I mean, this is the first time in a while that I've taken MARTA. There was a guy sitting on the train smoking a joint. We left that train car and went into another train car because that train car stunk so bad from the guy smoking a joint on the train. On a different train, a guy had his feet hung over the back of another bench so that nobody could sit on the bench in front of him because he had his feet hanging over, and he had his vape out, and it was clearly not nicotine that he was inhaling. Dude was high as a kite, could not stop puffing on his vape. Clouds going everywhere. The broken window theory of crime is that if you crack down on those petty crimes, those little crimes, the bigger crimes are less likely to happen. The left tried very hard to discredit the broken window theory of crime. They tried to suggest it didn't work, that the data was skewed, the data was rigged, except there's a problem. When Rudy Giuliani in New York, when he was mayor, was using the broken window theory of crime to crack down on crime, you didn't have a massive crime wave. You got rid of it, and suddenly you're seeing a crime wave. Same thing in Atlanta. They decided to stop cracking down on the small crimes, and now the big crimes, the carjackings, the car racings, the burglaries, the shootings, everything is on the rise. The new mayor, to his credit, has been cracking down, but there's only so much they can do. They are shorthanded, but the moral of the story here is we have forgotten that when you aggressively police the small crimes, you stamp out the big crimes from happening, and people forgot that. You crack down on the potheads on your subway system, you're not having to deal with the murderers, because over time, the potheads convert to being the gang members who convert to being the murderers, so you crack down on it early. We have forgotten massive government spending into the economy caused inflation. Everybody warned, Larry Summers warned, others warned, conservative economists warned, but the left decided that there was new modern monetary theory, and in modern monetary theory, you could spend as much as you wanted without getting inflation because we had such a great long period of no inflation going back to the Reagan era. We had for so long no inflation. The left decided inflation was a thing of the past. Now, here's what's so interesting about inflation is for the longest time, no one could really understand why inflation happened. You go all the way back to the Roman days. The crisis of the 3rd century was in part provoked because of inflation, and it was because they were printing so much money to pay the military. They were taking the precious metals, the silvers and the golds, they were mixing them with other metals to cheapen the currency, and it caused inflation, and wages couldn't keep up, prices skyrocketed. It took a very long time to figure it out. And over time, we keep forgetting the lessons of inflation, and one of those is you spend so much, you dump so much money into an economy that it provokes inflation. Wages go up, but not as fast as prices. And it provokes this problem of inflation, and we keep forgetting it. And we have forgotten the basics of inflation such that the Biden administration is now having to deal with provoking inflation in a way that many economists warned them would happen, but the progressive economists of the day said, no, we can try new things. Inflation's no longer a problem, except they've caused it to become a problem because they forgot the basics. We've forgotten the basics of security, and we seem to every 30 years or so have to relearn this one. The USS Cole got bombed, and we didn't respond, and that provoked al-Qaeda to do 9/11. We see the attacks on American soldiers abroad. We see a weak border at home. That just provokes others to say the Americans have gone back to sleep. We can take them. And one of the great basics we have forgotten is family. The two-parent nuclear household matters greatly. The two-parent nuclear household, through trial and error over thousands of years, through multiple generations, society learned was the best, most stable way to raise a family and provide a future society. There are a lot of people now who they don't even care about producing the next generation. There's this phenomenon, dink. Now, when I was a kid, that word meant something entirely else. Now you hear people refer to dinks. They're not referring to sexual activity. They're referring to dual income, no kids. And they put up TikTok videos boasting about how grand and glorious their life is because it's a husband and wife who have no kids and dual incomes, and they get to spend lavishly on themselves. It's very selfish. And at some point, they're going to be 75 years old and have no child to take care of them. And their family will have nothing to do with them because they've been selfish ingrates for so long. And they'll need government programs to take care of them, and the government will not take care of them in the same way their own family would take care of them. But people have forgotten. People have forgotten the basics of child rearing. They've forgotten the basics of family stability. They've forgotten the basics of societal stability. They've decided they can do better, that they know better, that they can do something different, that society itself didn't figure it out as well as they can figure it out. There's a real arrogance in current society about these things, and we keep through trial and error forgetting these things. Taxation is another issue. You know, if you cut taxes, you stimulate economic growth, which drives more revenue to the Treasury and supply-side economics. You keep raising taxes on people, people adjust their money and their revenue and their income streams and where their money is so that they don't have to pay the government as much money. And suddenly you see less taxes and you see a more inefficient system. There is a level of taxation that is highly efficient, and the left wants to go way above it and drive up inefficiencies. They forget. We forget the lessons. We forget the lessons of how to order a society with family. We forget the lessons of how to stop inflation. We forget the lessons of how to increase revenue to the government without bankrupting small businesses through the tax code. We forget the lessons of showing our strength abroad and at home. And we forget the lesson of American leadership around the world. Every time the United States decides not to lead, others decide to rear their head. Many of them do not share our values. And they mean us harm. And as we sit back and rest on our laurels, they try to take over and provoke world war. We've forgotten that free markets work. We have a bunch of people on the left and the new right who malign free markets. Now, it's not that they were perfect, and yes, some Americans got hurt in the process of NAFTA and things like that, but capitalism has elevated more people out of poverty than any other economic strategy in the history of mankind, and free markets have done more than socialized, controlled markets around the world, including in this country. And if we can enable people to adapt and enable people to innovate and stop picking winners and losers at the government level, the free market works for everybody, from the poor to the rich. And in fact, the free markets destabilize the rich in such a way that poor people can become rich, because we stop picking winners and losers and stop subsidizing the rich, and we just level the playing field and let it all sort out through the creative destruction of the marketplace. We've totally forgotten that the creative destruction of the marketplace is a good thing. Government has been creating entities that are too big to fail, and they keep bailing them out, which creates more moral hazard, which continues to stifle the economy. We have forgotten the basics of how a society should be ordered. We've forgotten the basics of how to fight crime. We've forgotten the basics of how to build a family. We've forgotten the basics of all these things. And today we're left with a situation where the Federal Reserve has raised interest rates so high, it's pricing people out of the American dream of home ownership because they can't afford the mortgage and they can't afford the house. And what do we have? The New York Times belly aching about the 30-year mortgage, which we forget was the best way to do a mortgage. No other country had the 30-year mortgage, and it's why home ownership became an established part of the American dream, unlike other parts of the world, because it's a phenomenally good idea, the 30-year fixed mortgage. We're on the verge of forgetting that that's such a good thing as well. We forget these things and repeat through a cycle of errors these problems. We've got to remember we already know the way to work a society. Have a mom and a dad in a house raising kids who get an education, who get out of school, go to college, get a degree, or get a vocational skill set, and then you get married, and then you have kids, so you avoid a cycle of poverty. You fight crime at the lowest level and the smallest crimes to deter the bigger crimes from ever happening. You keep people safe in cities, and you give them a free market on a level playing field without the government picking winners and losers, so the poorest among us through entrepreneurial spirit can get wealthy, and the wealthiest among us through a laxity and a lack of morality can collapse and go bankrupt, and the rest of us can pick over the carcass of the bankruptcy and ourselves find some entrepreneurial spirit to grow, and the cycle repeats itself. We have forgotten these very basics of a good and well-ordered society, and the Democrats and now a lot of people on the right continue to forget those lessons and have decided we'll try something new and shiny. First of all, there's no new idea under the sun. And second, your ideas suck. We already know what works. We need to get back to what works, from crime to the economy to raising families. It's not hard. We just have to be boring and go with what works instead of always trying to find something new and shiny that's just a repackaged failed idea on the ash heap of history.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather, now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. Always happy to have you across the United States of America. I mentioned again the inflation cool down. So the Fed's having its 2-day policy meeting. They're not expected to make any changes. And you really are seeing groups. The New York Times has now ran a piece I mentioned a couple weeks ago. They've circulated it again, going to war with the 30-year mortgage, because essentially what's happened is a lot of Americans, while interest rates were low, they got their mortgages, they bought their houses, and they're not selling because they don't want to sell and go to a place that has where they're going to have to get a 7 or 8% mortgage when they've got maybe a 2% mortgage right now. And so the New York Times is like, oh, these dirty homeowners who are holding onto their houses, driving up the cost. We have a supply. But, at the same time, it's the NIMBYs, not in my backyard, who don't want expanded housing opportunities for younger people. A lot of couples starting out are being forced to rent, which is building a resentment in the system that's not healthy. People expected they would be able to buy a house. And by the way, I should note, there are still houses you can buy out there, but you're not going to get the 5-bedroom, 5.5 bedroom on a half-acre of land house. You're going to get the 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom built in the 1940s or 50s house that's a commute from your job. People willing to do stuff like that can still find houses to buy. They got to make the decision. Everybody wants to have their cake and eat it too. We went through this great economic period until the Democrats ruined it with their massive spending campaign that drove up inflation. And people have to adapt. But part of this as well is we're back to normal times. Normal times have 4 to 5% interest rates. So we're a little higher than normal times right now, getting things back down. But 4 to 5% interest rates, pretty normal times. And it's like the world when cash was so cheap forgot what normal times were like. That allowed a lot of .com companies to expand where they didn't have to worry about profits. They didn't have to worry about revenue, really. They just expanded. As long as you could show growth, they didn't care about making profits. And then suddenly interest rates start going up, and the investors, the venture capitalists were like, hey, now you got to figure out how to turn a profit. And you would be amazed at the number of people who could run a business so long as they didn't have to make a profit. That's the ridiculous scenario we see playing out so much now, is that you have a lot of companies that when money was cheap and easy to get, they could grow a company and they never had to figure out how to make a profit. And of course, the profit motive, people treated it as bad, but the profit motive is actually very good. The incentive to make a profit actually keeps the world running. Even in socialist and communist regimes, at the end of the day, someone was making a profit, and usually it was the greedy oligarchs. In a free market system, it's the entrepreneurs who make the profit. If anything, we need to shake up our system further and deregulate it further and get the government out of picking winners and losers so that the middle class and the poor have the great opportunity to make a profit, as opposed to just the already rich. We have forgotten these basics, and at some point it does come all undone. We just got to figure out how to make it work. Everybody wants to forget the basics because the basics are boring. The tried and the true are boring. People want to be adventurers and find new things as opposed to settling for the old things. But, so I've mentioned Charlie Munger before, who died. He was Warren Buffett's right-hand man, and he was a big proponent of the tried and the true, the stable and the boring, and he became a billionaire through it, as opposed to a lot of people who become billionaires and then bankrupt by trying all the tried and true and then going for the shiny and the new. We just need to go back to the basics, y'all. It's really not that hard. All right. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.